I come from the world of sport, and in the world of sport, accountability is one of the key words that we use.
I really want to pick this thing with Saurav Ganguly Dada. That person was known to be very energetic. In your interviews, you giving his brief, I get this vibe that he was like a very upfront and high energetic person.
I'm looking Mohammed Kaif, Yuvraj Singh, Zahid Khan, Ashish Nehra, Harbhajan Singh. These were all youngsters at the time in that team. They were able to shine. You had Rahul, you had Sachin, you had Sehwag, you had Kumble, you had Srinath, all in the team. Everyone has a point of view, but he was a man who had to make a decision. You have to understand what you want to let go of. Because if you don't understand what you're prepared to let go of, you will never be able to welcome what you need in your life. If you don't have the right people around you, then you need to invest in carving out the space. You never signed up for that. We need to respect the choices they've made, hold the sanctity of those choices in place. The mindset of a champion is irrespective of what's happening, you recognize that I am still in control and I am still in power. They did that with Dhoni, they did that with Ganguly, they did that with Tendulkar, they do that with so many other athletes. Who are we to decide when a person should retire?
Thank you, Shyamal, for being here. It's lovely having you. And just like I told you before the conversation, for the first time having sort of someone not entirely from a sports genre, but a bit from sports genre. And honestly, I just loved whatever you have written, your views, either on mental health or on sports psychology. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very, very much for inviting me. I'm thoroughly excited to be here at your studio in Delhi and looking forward to an engaging conversation.
Yeah. How's Delhi, by the way? You are coming from Barcelona.
Yeah, Delhi is always a little hectic when I come here, you know, getting stuck in traffic and everything. It's a little, sometimes it gets a little intense, but I love the city. My best friend lives here, so it's always helpful when I come in and get to catch up with friends, so it's good.
Yeah. But for coming from, like, you have traveled to so many cities, you have visited so many countries, coming to Delhi, do you feel that change, drastic change?
Of course, every time I come to India, I feel the change quite drastically. You know, when I used to live in India, I used to live in Mumbai for almost 12 years. Then I moved to Barcelona 3 years ago. I'm from South Africa. Both of my home countries and currently Barcelona, we don't have obviously that many people in there. You know, the countries are much smaller, so the way things are managed are very, very different. You know, when I come to India, I try to keep a lot of space between meetings or between activities, because sometimes logistically it's just difficult to get from A to B, and there's so much that's happening around you that for me to be truly mindfully present and give my attention to someone, I need to have space between those meetings as such, so that I can reset the mind, you know, be in the right energy to show up.
Yeah, but what do you enjoy more, Delhi or Bombay?
I enjoy Bombay more, for sure. It was home for almost 12 years. I'm more familiar with the city. I have a lot of friends there. I find it a lot easier to navigate. It's not that I find Delhi, I find it very big, quite honestly, Delhi, you know, like getting
bigger than Bombay?
Yes, I find getting from one suburb, and maybe because I don't understand the geography of the city in terms of what would be the easiest way to get from A to B. I also don't understand the flow of traffic, what direction traffic's moving in, at what time. So these are small pieces of information that make living in a city either easier or more difficult. When I say Mumbai is easier, I understand the landscape of the city. I understand which routes to take to get A to B. I know how to structure my meetings on the basis of traffic flow. What's the best time of days to do things, and all of these are subtle pieces of information that just make an experience in a city a lot more either difficult or a lot easier. So on the basis of this lack of information in Delhi, sometimes I struggle in here. So that's why Mumbai is my choice.
And you're living in Spain. That's a beautiful city to live in. Barcelona.
Correct. Barcelona is a stunning city. We call it Gaudi's Barcelona. Gaudi was the famous architect that lived in Barcelona. You know, he was a very, very iconic architect. He brought in these curved buildings, these flowers, these mosaic patterns, mushroom sort of looking structures into his buildings where things flowed in. And I consider myself very blessed because wherever I'm walking, I walk past one of Gaudi's buildings. It's a very, very beautiful tourist hub. The food is amazing, very centrally located. So yes.
And the weather.
And the weather is always incredible.
Especially the AQI part in comparison to Delhi.
For sure.
Yeah. Like, Shyam, when I see your journey or when I see what you have done, what you have created, it makes me wonder what was this person like in childhood? Because I was seeing in some of the interview you were saying like around 23 you turned out to this path of spirituality. You basically went to ISKCON and were planning to be a monk, not entirely, but a major part of you was planning to be. How were you as a child? Were you like this or?
No, I grew up in a very, very spiritual, very religious family. My family are probably 5 generations of Vaishnavas, devotees of Lord Krishna. So everything in my home was centered around that service to Lord Krishna in some shape and form. Every meal that was cooked, we celebrated every function. That was the energy and the ethos of the home as such. So my childhood was very much that sort of grounding, that energy. I grew up, my bedtime stories were stories from the Bhagavad Gita or the Mahabharata. This was the life that I grew up with. We lived with my grandparents, so we had their guidance, their upbringing. They were very, very steeped in culture. The way they grew us up was also very, very, I wouldn't say orthodox, but very, structured in that way there. So when I didn't want to sort of be a monk, I wanted to be an athlete when I was a child, and I played a lot of cricket. But when things got difficult in South Africa during the sporting time, during what was called the apartheid, the only place of rescue that I had was the temple, because I came from that environment where, whenever anything was difficult, the first place we looked to was prayer, and so that was a very, very natural part of my ecosystem, which made me consider that as an option. And then it just prolonged for a period of time, for a few years, which was very, very beautiful actually.
So that time you were like solely preaching, but at the moment, let's say you are someone who is not like preaching one entity. You believe in religion, you believe in other religions, you have read so many texts. But that time during your childhood,
no, I've always been open. I've always been open to learning from every religion. I've studied whether it's Judaism, whether it's Islam, whether it's Christianity. I listen to tons of podcasts almost every single morning. There's a pastor bishop on YouTube that I listen to one of his sermons. I think every religion offers something so beautiful. They offer certain practices which are very, very sacrosanct in that religion, which teach you so much. So the learning, I take learnings in from everywhere. In terms of the practices that I practice things that are steeped in Hinduism as such, because that's my belief system. It's very difficult to practice the rituals of every religion. You can absorb the learnings from every religion and bring it into your life. But the practices I practice are very, very sacrosanct to Hinduism.
Yeah, and I think Hinduism, the best part about it is, because being a Hindu, I can like relate to this, that it's not institutionalized. It's like a way of living.
100%. Yeah.
That's something that's very relatable. Even like you see people who are, I'm not going political here, but if you see unbiased people, if they are from other sects of religion as well, but they might be praising or giving their devotion to someone who is a Hindu deity. Because again, Hinduism doesn't like restrict itself to like certain amount of people.
No, I think, I'm generally very careful with what I say, but the one thing that I do want to say is that I think a large amount, having spent almost 4 years living in the temple, we had a spiritual master every single day. The day started with a lecture from the Bhagavad Gita where we deconstructed. We'd spend an hour just deconstructing 2 lines, 2 sentences. And this would happen every single day. And visiting very, very enlightened people who had studied scriptures for a long time would come present lectures. You're surrounded by people who are always talking about that religion and always breaking up every single word and analyzing it. What I learned through this process was that for you to truly understand any religion or any scripture or anything, you need to engage with people who are absorbed in that, who live that life, who understand, who deconstruct it. And I think one of the big challenges that we have in the world right now is that many people, for various subjects, and not just religion, various subjects, are just on the surface of that subject. So the understanding of that text or that knowledge or that subject is very surface oriented. So they're not really in the best place to deconstruct it from multiple perspectives. So one of the key learnings that I've had is that, to truly find and truly learn and truly understand something, look towards people who have dedicated a life to understanding that aspect, to understanding whether it's a field of medicine, whether it's a field of philosophy, whether it's a practice, because when you dedicate an entire life to one particular thing, you see everything through that lens. And your perspective of life through that lens is very different from a person who stays at that surface. So that was the main learning actually from it. So whether I'm learning from about different religions or different philosophies or different arts, I always try to find the person who's dedicated the minimum of a decade in learning that because they have gone through an entire emotional arc of that scripture.
And is presenting that scripture without any biasness.
Correct.
Because there are some people who would like to add their own flavors to it, their own perspectives to it. But getting someone who really tells you what is the actual context behind like this being written, that is something that's very rare.
For sure. 100%.
Yeah. And you talk about mindfulness also a lot, especially in today's time. I'm not sure like how active you are on social media, but being a Gen Z myself and like seeing this, like marketing is my genre even. So reels, YouTube videos, podcasts is still a good thing, but if you specifically talk about reels or short form content, it has picked up so much that it is making people's attention span really very low.
Correct.
Like people cannot concentrate. Like we are opening our phones, I think more than 100 times a day. Like we are unlocking it, we are seeing it, we may just get a rush by seeing notifications and then we shut off. How much is the importance of mindfulness at today's time?
I think it's critically important. What you're saying is so true, that our attention span is dropping. If you speak to any marketing person, they'll tell you that we need to grab someone's attention in the first 3 seconds of any engagement, whether it's a reel or whatever it is. So they'll ask you to plug a name or plug some clickbait in there to grab someone's attention. Every 3 seconds unlocks or gives you permission to watch another 3 seconds as such. So in this world where there's so much of hyper distraction, what is the role of mindfulness? It's critically important. It's critically important because what you're losing cannot be quantified. When we say what you're losing, the distraction is pulling away from health choices. It's pulling away from the quality of emotion, the quality of conversation you're going to get. These distractions are pulling you further and further away from the things that truly matter. And the people who are consuming most of this content in short form are a younger generation who have not come to fully understand what the importance of these nuanced things like good human connection, emotional conversations, being able to connect to your thoughts, your feelings, being able to understand, deconstruct it, be able to express it, even understand the power of every word that you utter. These are life journeys that you will come to learn a little bit later on in life. And what's happening is that these distractions are pulling you further away from learning these things. So mindfulness is a very, very important subject right now because it teaches you to be more present with every single emotion. It teaches you to understand the weight of every single word you utter. And these will have ramifications on your leadership style, on how you integrate into a team. They'll also have ramifications on the quality of relationship and the type of parent that you will be. So it has a beautiful implication everywhere. But the thing with mindfulness is that it's a practice. And like all practices, they get better. You know,
Definitely.
they get better and they get better. The more you commit to it, the more you dedicate to it. So it's not something that you can do just once a day. You know, I like to use the word ritual as opposed to a task. A task is something you do once. A ritual is something that you repeat. It's very repetitive. So mindfulness must become a ritual in your life, because when something is a ritual, then it has the possibility to change the functioning of your brain, both chemically and structurally. That's called neuroplasticity, right? So once you practice something on a day-to-day basis, the neuroplasticity of your brain changes, and you start to see the implication of that and the ramifications of that in your life as such.
Yeah, and I think COVID has a huge role to play here, because that was that one year in everyone's life where like the world was shut off and we shifted towards online options. I mean, work from home, Google meetings, like everything being online is something that is just result of COVID. Correct. Otherwise, it would have taken like a long time. So I think that made people
I think COVID came in at a time. It had a role to play, but I don't like to blame COVID for anything, because at the end of the day, one of the best gifts you have as a human being is free will, the ability to make a decision,
Very true.
The ability to be conscious of every single decision you make. You may be 40 years old or 50 years old and COVID was around for 10, 12 months, you know, how can you blame everything on those 12 months? You know, that happened. You have had a lot more stimulus after COVID, and you've had a lot more stimulus before COVID. In fact, it's 3 years since COVID is done. So if those 12 months were accountability for what changed in there, in terms of how you're programming, what about the 3 years after that? You know, when we've not been in COVID. So, you know, I come from the world of sport, and in the world of sport, accountability is one of the key words that we use. The athletes who perform the best are the ones who take full accountability for every single aspect of their life. And if you are someone who's going to be blaming COVID for how you are and your distraction and your inability to focus, then you have surrendered all your power to an external thing. That is not the mindset of a champion. The mindset of a champion is irrespective of what's happening, you recognize that I am still in control and I am still in power. You know, and once you start to relinquish that power, you lose everything. Once you start to take control of that decision-making power, you start to take control of your life again. So for everyone listening, you know, it's really important. COVID is one such example. Markets dropping is another example. A war in a particular country is an example. You know, you having to live an hour and a half away is another example of something that you could relinquish your power to, you know, or having a boss or being in a toxic environment. All of these are justifiable reasons for you to make an excuse to not perform. But if you surrender to that excuse, you've surrendered your life. You still have in that moment a choice to make. And that choice is, I will not let that one moment define who I am. And I always tell people, you know, in the world of psychology, in the world of healing, in the world of spirituality, you know, you hear this word trauma. And one of my areas of expertise as a psychologist is childhood trauma, which are incidences that have happened in your past. Right? But I tell everyone, right, there comes a time in life, right, when you have to draw a line and you have to say, from this moment on, I refuse to let anything in my past determine the direction I'm going to move in. I refuse to let anything in my past determine the speed that I'm moving in. You have to draw that line in the sand to say, from this moment on, I will only look forward. Because if I don't look forward, I am going to be at the mercy of something that I didn't have a control of. And why would you want to do that to yourself?
Yeah, I think the hard part is acceptance here, that majorly people don't get. I mean, there is this very famous 5 stages of grief as well.
Correct.
Right. So that also pretty much explains this cycle that one goes through once they go through a trauma or a sad incident. Majorly people, I think they just are either bargaining at that stage, or most of them are actually at denial.
Correct.
For the rest of their lives.
Yeah, most of them are denial, but why are they stuck in this space? They're stuck in the space because they stuck to the identity of that incident.
Yeah.
You know, identity is what we're actually attached to. We're not attached to the trauma. We're not attached to the person because they may have moved on. We're not attached to the pain. We're attached to the identity that it brings. So for example, you know, let's assume I have come from an environment where parents got divorced, or I come from an environment where there may have been some emotional abuse or sexual abuse or verbal abuse and stuff. That instance has gone forward, but that incident has given me a certain identity. I have come from that environment. I have been abused. I have gone through that. I have had a difficult childhood, right? That identity in many shapes and forms gives you a reason to maybe underperform, or gives you a reason to be in a certain way or not push yourself outside of that limit. You have to relinquish the identity of that, right? For you to push beyond that. It's the identity that you're holding on to, not the incident, not the trauma, not the pain, the identity that comes with it. When you relinquish that identity, you give yourself a chance to transcend it. And that's what you need. You need to transcend your identity. And one of the key things that I do is, if you look at my life, you know, I started off as a high performance strength and conditioning coach. You know, I was only focused on the body. You know, then I pivoted towards understanding and studying. I got a double master's in psychology when I moved towards understanding the mind, right? Then I realized after I understood the mind, I was at a unique place where I understood the intersection between a healthy body and a healthy mind. So I moved from the body to the mind to the intersection between that. Then I transitioned to understanding and coaching leadership in it. So coaching mindset, not even the mind, but the mindset, your approach to something. Then even in that, I started off with people. Then I transitioned to teams. Then I transitioned to organizations as such, you know. Everything is flowing in the direction, but every time I wish to take one step into something else, I have to let my old identity go. You know, if you don't let your old identity go, it will keep pulling you back. And an example of this, for example, is that, you know, I have a qualification in sports and exercise science. I have trained professional athletes physically for more than 15 years. I understand it better than most personal trainers you'll interact with. Okay, but today, if someone asks me to go and demonstrate an exercise, or someone asks me to write a gym program for them, or someone asks me to do an interview for Men's Health magazine on training, the answer is no, I will not do that.
And
why? Because that was an old identity. If I take that one opportunity, I pull myself back to there, right? Which means I need to work harder again to get to where I want to be. You have to understand what you want to let go of. Because if you don't understand what you're prepared to let go of, you will never be able to welcome what you need in your life.
Do you feel this is something that a person can do it on their own, or they need a professional to tell them what they have to let go of?
No, you can have clarity of thought. You can only have clarity of thought though if you have space, if you carve space out for yourself. What does space mean? Space means being comfortable by yourself, you know, sitting in meditation or just being by yourself, being comfortable with your own thoughts, because that's where you'll process and you'll reflect and you'll introspect. That's where the clarity will come from. So if you're not comfortable with space, then you won't be able to derive that clarity yourself. You'll need the help of someone else. But having said that, the best athletes, the best CEOs, the best entrepreneurs in the world, the best scientists, the best doctors, they all have mentors, they all have coaches. So that external help is a very, very critical part to the growth process. And unfortunately, sometimes it comes at a price. It's a little expensive to get high quality people around you. But that price is not an expense. It's an investment. And you got to see it as that there. So having good people around you will fast track your growth in the right direction. If you don't have the right people around you, then you need to invest in carving out the space. But either way, space can mean not saying yes to every opportunity that comes, so that you have time by yourself, or that investment can come in time. Either way, you need to make that investment, otherwise your growth is stunted.
Yeah. This letting go part, I really want to connect this with the people from your genre, that is the sports peeps or even some of the Bollywood people that you managed. When we talk about these people, we attach a big name, a persona with them, either Sachin Tendulkar, Saurav Ganguly, Abhishek Bachchan or Amitabh Bachchan. All of these people, they have like big names. So when you talk to them on a human level, on a personal level, do you feel because there are so many titles already attached to them or given to them by the world, it's very difficult for them to let go of the personality?
No, this is not true. Everything is based on relationship, on my relationship with them. And every single thing is...
No, is it difficult for them to let go of that thing?
It's not difficult. In fact, quite honestly, in my experience, these celebrities are the most open and the most transparent.
Oh, wow.
They understand who they can trust. They understand who all of the barriers to entry. So for example, let me explain this to you. When you work with a celebrity, before you get the chance to work with them, they have a whole bunch of criteria. They have a whole bunch of people around them that are doing all of their checklists, right? The mere fact that you've got into the room to work with them means you've ticked all of the boxes that they think are important for you to get there. So now that they've allowed you into the room, why should there be any judgment and why should there be any more barriers? They completely let go, they completely surrender. The checkpoints are done before that. Now, the average person doesn't have those checkpoints. You don't even have clarity of what are your non-negotiables. So that's why when you're sitting in front of a person, you still don't know whether you trust that person or not because you don't have a checklist. My celebrities, it's very easy for them. They have a checklist, they know what criteria, they're looking for qualifications, they're looking for experience, they're looking for proximity, they've done everything. So once you enter the room, it's complete transparency and complete trust. Most people don't have that. That's why they struggle to trust people. Yeah. So working with them is very, very easy actually, because the relationships are already established by the time you walk into that room. And they realize the one beautiful thing about a professional person is he understands when an expert's in his room and he surrenders to that expert. The average person still wants to be the expert even when the expert's in the room. I used to run a practice called Heal, and people would come to me where they needed to be diagnosed with certain injuries or needed certain treatment, but they are telling me what to do, and I'm like, if you knew what to do, why did you even show up here?
True.
But when you work with a truly professional person, and the names that you mentioned are truly professional people, because that's how they got to where they are, by being professional. They understand the art of surrendering when there's a better person in the room.
So basically you don't have to force the being in close proximity with them. It's like something they already welcome.
Of course, 100%, yeah.
Yeah, that's very different to hear, because even if you hear normal incidents of a normal person who has, let's say, tried therapy or going to a psychologist, I am not really sure they get comfortable so easily. Like you telling this checklist thing, I think this is something that even majorly many of the psychologists don't want to cover. Like they want to give this pre-brief of before getting to someone's proximity.
Yeah, 100%. It's everything, like I said, comes down to how well you understand yourself. How well do you know what is important? How much do you value the expertise in the room, and how much do you actually are willing to change more than anything else? That's a critical thing. One of the problems, when I ran a practice called Heal, which was a physio and physical rehab business.
Is it stopped now?
I've exited, so the business is still continuing under different leadership and different venture funds are managing it right now. But one of the key things we did was we had a very, very fast turnaround rate with how we rehabilitated people and how we got rid of pain.
And these were like middle class people, or
everybody, from athletes, middle class, anyone. It wasn't just celebrities. Okay. And one of the critical things with it was that, I told people we were able to achieve this because both of us were meeting at one point. And what was that point? That point was I had no interest in trying to make sure I treated you for 10 sessions, 20 sessions, 50 sessions. I had no interest in making sure you were my patient for 6 months or 1 year, right? You came to me because you wanted to be healed as quickly as possible. And I treated you with the vision that I want to get rid of you as fast as possible.
And what were these people going through?
Various physical ailments, maybe neck pain, maybe back pain, maybe some people needed rehab.
Nothing on a mental level?
Nothing on a mental level at this stage, just purely physical.
Right?
We wanted to get rid of you as possible. Now, it worked and we were able to produce the results because both people were meeting at the same level. And people always told me, I said, when a practice is built on a person seeing you frequently, every single week for months and years, their agenda is to keep you there for as long as possible, and your agenda is to get rid of that for as possible. The intention is wrong. If the intention is wrong, how can the purpose be fulfilled? So I use this just as an example, not to discredit any practices or how people function, because everything is very individual. But the essence of what I'm saying is that the intention between the people coming together must be meeting at the same point. If it's not meeting at the same point, the outcome will never be achieved. This is how great teams are built. This is how teams win championships. This is how people heal. This is how you can find and build great companies. The intention and the meeting point has to be sacrosanct and be celebrated by everybody in that room. If it is not, the outcome will never be achieved.
Yeah. I want to take you back to World Cup time during 2003. And I really want to pick this thing with Saurav Ganguly Dada. That person was known to be somewhere like very energetic, and even in your interviews when I was listening, you giving his brief, how was he in person? Like I get this vibe that he was like a very upfront, not uptight, but upfront and high energetic person. Since you were in such a close proximity with them, were you able to see the softer side of him?
100%. I think, you must understand that the public perception of Dadaji and the perception of the players inside him was very, very different. How you all saw him as a public person was that person who was a very commanding presence. I think he was a prince of Calcutta, the Indian captain. We called him all of that. That was the persona around him. In the team, he was the most humble, the most heartwarming, the kindest person you ever met. And if you speak to all of the youngsters who were in that team at that stage, who are now very senior players and have even retired, I'm looking Mohammad Kaif, Yuvraj Singh, Zahir Khan, Ashish Nehra, Harbhajan Singh. These were all youngsters at the time in that team, right? They were able to shine because of his kindness, So he wasn't the person you think he is and he was with everyone in there. He was the most remarkable leader there was. In fact, he empowered every single person. Everyone thought that he stood up in front of every team meeting and he was the one who spoke and he was the one who told people what to do. That's the furthest thing from the truth. He was the last person to speak. John Wright was the last person to speak. Sachin was the last person to speak. So Rahul Dravid was the last person to speak. The only people who spoke were the youngsters because they were given the freedom and the platform to do it. That is why that team did so well, because every single person had a voice, including 16-year-old Parthav Patel at that time. Parthav Patel, young Parthav Patel, he was the one who was standing up and speaking. His voice was as equal to a Dada. It was as equal, and that was the essence of why that team was so good.
And on a personal level, were you able to ever connect with Dada?
Yes, 100%. We spent, 8 weeks together chatting. We deconstructed matches. We chatted. There were a lot of personal incidences that happened where our trust just started to get built. One was that game against Pakistan that I keep talking about at Centurion, where we didn't know whether to bat or bowl first, And one of my key areas that I was adding value in that team was that I knew South African conditions better than anyone else, So I was able to add value in that. And over time, as the results started to stack up, he trusted my word a little bit more. And that solidified the relationship a lot more. But you must understand that I didn't have the pressure of a nation on me like what he had. So he had to balance the perspectives because everyone was giving him information. John Wright, the curators, we had international expertise. I remember we may have had even Dean Jones, who was a consultant that was advising us. You had Rahul, you had Sachin, you had Sehwag, you had Kumble, you had Srinath, all in the team. Everyone has a point of view. But he was a man who had to make a decision. Now, when you have so many credible people in the room who are giving you great advice and have backed up results with their advice, you still have a very, very tough job of deciding who to listen to and what information to use. That pressure no one else had except him, but he never showed it, and he never made you feel like your opinion didn't matter. He listened to every single person. Saurav was the first person on the ground. He was the last person to leave. He sat down in the locker room with every single person. And he was brilliant as a leader because he also trusted that the senior people knew how to take care of themselves. So you would not see him spending a lot of time talking to Sachin, talking to Rahul. He left them. He knew that they knew how to manage their energy, how to manage their emotions.
He didn't want to micromanage.
He didn't micromanage anyone. He knew, he understood. He could pick up on people's emotions. He knew when they were a little tired, when they were a little scared. He made changes that protected them, that gave them the ability to shine. He empowered them. He put them in positions where he knew that if they shone, the team could win. See, Saurav was a genius because he knew that in a World Cup team, to win a World Cup, the expertise of your senior talent lay the foundation for a win. But it's the courage of the juniors that pushed the win over the line. Saurav understood this better than anyone else. So he was trying to unlock the courage in the youngsters. And that's why we got as far as we did.
Yeah. And how was your time interacting with people like Sehwag, Sachin, and even Yuvraj?
I mean, my time, it was such a close-knit unit, such a close-knit family. We had no family staying with us, so it was just us. All the boys were together. We had maybe, I think we must have had about 10 support staff, so it was a very tight unit as such, and the relationship was amazing. We had a lot of fun, and everyone was always laughing. Everyone was very jovial. Even on the days when we were playing big games, like for example, we were playing England at Kingsmead or we were playing Pakistan at Centurion, everyone was laughing. And this is some key thing everyone should take in, that in high-performing elite teams, enjoyment and fun is a contributing factor at all times. When the fun leaves the room, that team will start to suffer. So we had fun all the time. The energy was very light. And when energy is light, people can be who they are. And the only time you can win is when you get the chance to be who you are.
Yeah. And actually, I got to a very interesting conversation with one of my friends who is into actually cricket a lot. Even I also don't follow cricket that much, but as much as I have seen, is it like the cricketers of this generation has become a little soft in comparison to the generation that we previously had?
No, it's a very difficult statement to make. The cricketers of this current generation are playing far more cricket than we played 2 or 3 decades ago, right? So the workload on them is a lot more. And think about yourself. For example, you are sitting here recording a podcast. I don't know how many you would record in a week or a month. Maybe you record 3 days a month or 5 days a month and you bank it up. But if I asked you to show up here every single day at 8 o'clock, and I asked you to record every day till 8 p.m. and there were back-to-back people recorded, can I expect the quality of your 5th podcast on your 25th day to be the same as the quality of your podcast on day 1? The answer is no, I can't. Because of the quantum. So what's happened is that as the workload starts to increase, it's not that people get soft, it's that sometimes, you cannot give so much emotional energy to every single incident that happens, otherwise you will burn out. So what has happened right now is that because the quantum of workload physically and mentally on an athlete has increased, right, they are managing their energy very, very differently to how athletes 2 decades ago managed their energy and how they communicated. The world has changed. So it's not that the athlete has changed. You must understand that the world has completely transformed. So how we function in that world is also slowly molding in response to that word. There's a word called ontological conditioning, which means that we are a byproduct of the environment around us. You started off this conversation by referencing COVID. COVID was an incident that happened for 10 to 12 months. In that bubble, how we started to respond was molded by the environment itself. So when the environment changed, how we responded to that environment changed. Correct. And some of us are still facing the repercussions of that thing. So if an athlete's environment is changing, why are we not expecting them and their response to that environment to change?
Yeah. But do you support that the volume has increased so much?
It's a fact. They're playing more cricket. Think of the number of leagues that are happening. You have IPL, you look international T20, you have Test cricket, you have 50 over cricket, you have Caribbean Premier League.
But do you support that?
Do I support so much cricket going on? I am a big believer that so much of opportunity is great because more athletes are getting noticed, more people are getting to put food on the table. Why should only 50 or 100 people be able to make a living from it? So all of these leagues are doing a great job because they're creating opportunities for commentators, groundsmen, media people like yourself. Content creators are rising, athletes are getting, so any ecosystem that grows is absolutely fantastic. That's not a bad thing at all. But there has to be a level of education that comes in where the individual athlete starts to understand the ramifications of this workload on him. And he needs to understand, when do I chase money and when do I chase space for myself? And how do I balance healthy relationships with my family and my goals? The unfortunate thing is that because of all of that things that's happening is that these athletes chose to be athletes because they love a sport. Remember that. You want to be an athlete because you love a sport. Nowhere in your journey do you sign up to be torn apart by the media for every single other aspect of your life. You never signed up for that. You signed up because you love a sport and you want to play a sport. And you don't mind being criticized for that. But you definitely have a problem being criticized about the quality of your relationship with your partner or something else that happens in your life, or you made an investment in a startup that didn't go well. You didn't sign up for that. You signed up to be criticized on the basis of your profession. And this is where media have taken it completely wrong. And I feel that the one thing that needs to change is we need to respect the choices they've made and hold the sanctity of those choices in place when we represent them in the media.
Actually, you brought a very interesting point. I was actually going to ask you this only, that obviously cricketers used to receive all sort of criticism earlier back then also, during that time of 2003s or even before internet. But now they are more of like public figures. They do one advertisement, they do a particular thing which is all related to their personal life. They are being criticized and trolled for that. So do you think this is like affecting their mental health as well?
Oh, 100%. 100%. How can, if you open the internet and you got thousands of people saying something bad about you, and it's not that they understand you, it's not that they know you, it's not that they realize that the intention was bad, they just have zero information and they just, obviously that's going to affect your mental health. And if you see this every single day, then what's going to happen is you're going to become completely indifferent to this noise. When the first negative thing comes up around a performance for an athlete, it impacts them very, very strongly. But if this thing becomes repetitive and repetitive and repetitive, you become very, very indifferent to what is being said, isn't it? And that's the problem, is that the athletes at some stage will become indifferent to all of this. They don't care. They focus on what they need to, they give their best, they execute, they keep the environment tight, and they block everything else out.
I think that's what I think, like we should not take names, but because this is coming to my mind, like when Virat Kohli, I think he's planning to shift to London. He's planning to maybe retire in some time.
I don't know when he plans to retire, and it's none of our business.
Yeah, definitely.
We are in no position, and that's the other sad thing I see, is that the media start this question about when a person should retire. They did that with Dhoni, they did that with Ganguly, they did that with Tendulkar, they do that with so many other athletes. Who are we to decide when a person should retire? Like seriously, who are we, to decide? A person can not get selected to play for the country because it's a country, maybe we have some pride around who chooses to represent us, right? And if the person's performing very well, if they're not performing that. But who are we to decide which forms of cricket or sport they should play and they shouldn't play? I think that's a very personal, individual decision, and that is a decision that's taken by the athlete in conjunction with his close family and his close friends. It is a very, very personal thing. I just went through the whole experience now of Sunil Shetty playing his last game. You know, when he was traveling with us and we were playing at Salt Lake Stadium in Calcutta, literally just a couple of months ago, where he made a conscious choice that this was going to be his last game. You know, he engineered it in that way. He brought his family. Everything was happening. The result didn't go our way, but it was engineered in that way. He took a conscious decision around it. Footballers and Olympic athletes have the privilege of making that choice. Cricketers, unfortunately, we in the media seem to think that we have a right over them. We don't have a right over them. They're individual
100%.
people, you know, and we need to respect and draw boundaries more than anything else.
Yeah. I want to take you back to mindfulness again, this time touching the part of relationships here. Like you talked about this part where, like, obviously these two things might not relate, but again, like when you were during the time with the team in 2003 and you were traveling, you guys were staying together and all of that. If you put that in today's context, even not like talking at such a high level, even with normal people, even if we are staying together, we are not actually staying together. We are just there for the sake of being there. We are spending time on mobile phones or we are zoned out. We actually don't know like how to value relationships. Let it be romantic, let it be friendship wise. I really want to know from you, when you see things like this around you, how much of importance mindfulness becomes when it comes to relationships?
Mindfulness is critically important to everything, as I've mentioned to you. You know, how mindful you are. What is mindfulness? Mindfulness is your ability to be fully present in that. So we are having a conversation, I am fully present. Everything around me is completely switched off. Nothing is going to beep, nothing. I am fully focused on here. This is mindfulness, being present in here. If the mind is starting to waver about different things, if you're starting to think about what's happening there, every time one of the cameras beeps and your mind goes there, every time it goes there, it's not here anymore. You understand? You're not doing justice to that. So you're not doing justice to every word I say. So similarly, right, if different things are pulling your mind when you're sitting with a loved one, how is that loved one even going to feel like they're loved? Because they can see on your face that your attention has gone somewhere else. So if you are with someone you love and you tell them that you love them, but every time you're talking to them, there's something else that's pulling your attention and they can see it on your face that your attention has gone somewhere else, how are they going to actually feel that love? And over a time, how are they going to even trust that you love them? So what's happening is the lack of mindfulness is creating greater proximity between the words you are saying and the emotions you are emoting. Mindfulness as a practice is the only thing that's going to bring your emotion and your words closer together. So that's why it's so critically important if you want to have a healthy relationship. Either parenting, whether with your parents itself, with your loved one, boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, or whoever it is, whatever relationship you want to, mindfulness is the secret to making a person value that relationship.
And how do you actually implement that? Because I have heard so many things here like be conscious or start taking decisions. I think podcast, for me, if I speak personally, conversations like these one-on-one conversations have really done the way for me to be more conscious because it's my job at the moment. But again, if we talk for someone who is not obviously sitting in front of camera or just a normal person, if they want to do this, the mindfulness, how can they do it?
So one of the easiest practices that I give people to do is I tell them just sit down and just count your breaths. So you're sitting down here, no distraction. Every time you breathe in and breathe out, it's 1. So you go 1, then you go 2. Now each breath would be anywhere between 6 to 8 seconds, inhalation and exhalation. Okay, now let's assume if your mind wavers and goes somewhere else, you'll lose the count.
Yeah.
You know, the count, wherever it is, you'll lose it. You'll have to start again, or your mind will completely forget. And when it comes back and you realize that you've lost the count, you have to start from 0 again. But you will recall what the last number that you remembered was. Now, here's an interesting exercise. I tell my athletes, I give them this exercise. I say, hey, count your breaths. The athlete comes back and tells me, what was the last number you remember? He says 72. I said, okay, great. So I now take 72. I multiply it by 8 seconds. Okay. And now I've got a time limit. I understand exactly how many minutes he can hold his focus and attention. Okay. So now we know what we need to do to improve it. But I can take that timestamp and I can superimpose it onto different activities. You know, so when I'm doing a team drill with him, I know he can hold his focus for that. When he's having a conversation, I know he can hold his focus for that. You know, when he's even studying or doing exercises, I tell him, use this as a timestamp. Every so couple of minutes, or whether it's 5, 10, 15 minutes, get up, stand up, reset the mind, come back. You know, if the timestamp is very small, let's assuming it's couple of minutes only, then I tell them, don't get off the chair, but put an alarm. Every time that alarm rings after 3 minutes, all right, that bell sound itself will reset the mind for another 3 minutes. You know, after you do 5 or 6 of these, right, stand up, right, go for a walk, come back, reset again. So this breath count gives you a very, very real indication of how long you can hold your focus on something. And then in the world of professional sport and performance, we simply superimpose that timestamp over different activities that we need to do. And then obviously we practice every single day to increase the duration of that.
Yeah. Since you bought this thing, can we call this meditation, this breathing activity?
It is a meditation. Yeah, it's a form of meditation.
Actually, I was someone who was like really invested into meditation almost, I think, when I was in maybe 10th standard that time. But I would not count that as a serious meditation technique, because that was more of like a teenager sort of trying to find different ways of, I would rather say, pop spirituality, figuring out this is the new trend, like every teenager wants to go that way. Do you feel meditation is sort of overrated by people nowadays, because everyone wants to do it for a reason, but actually there is no reason to do meditation? It is just a part of you. It is just something that you do to explore different aspects of you.
There is far too much evidence for anyone to agree with that statement that you just made. You know, there's enough evidence to support the powerful impact of meditation on every single aspect of your life. You understand? And some things are just sacrosanct. You know, it is a powerful practice. It's like saying, you know, everyone says you should walk every day, right? So is it because everyone's saying it, it's just, you know, it's not important? No, it is important. That's why everyone's saying it. You know, everyone's saying meditation is important because it is important. And the reason why everyone is saying it is also because they're recognizing how few people can do it and how little mindful presence we have. That's why everyone is saying it. When a message starts to become amplified and amplified and amplified, it's because the urgency of that message is critically important. Not because the message is not important, or not because somebody wants to be heard. It's because the urgency of the message is so important. That's why it's getting amplified. So there's far too much research to support the pros of meditation, whether it's breath work, whether it's a mindfulness practice, whether it's meditation, whatever you want to call it, and whatever shape you want to do it. There's far too much of positive research to support it for us to completely discount that and say it's not important at all.
So doing meditation for a soul solution is not something that one should do?
For a soul solution, what do you mean by soul solution?
As in, I think majorly people want to try meditation because they want to find a solution. As in, they would like to go on a pathway where they like go into finding meaning of life or something like that. That's what majorly people want to do meditation for.
People want it. Answers will come to you during a space of meditation. During that stillness, answers will emerge. Right. You can't sit down to look for an answer. You sit down to find space, to find stability, to find stillness. You know, that's why you sit down in meditation, to teach your body how to recognize stillness. And from that stillness, answers will emerge. You can't sit down to find the answer.
Yeah.
It's like then going to a
Answer.
library and saying, you know what, hey, I have one question, I want to find the answer. Yes, you may stumble upon an answer, or you could waste your whole year and not find anything. You understand? But if you go with the open mind of saying, I'm going to a library because I want to read, you'll find a lot more answers than the answer you were looking for.
Yeah.
Correct.
Definitely.
So then that's exactly the same thing. If you do the practice, because the practice brings in stillness, the stillness will bring the answers. But if you go in looking for an answer, you'll miss everything else because the mind is laser focused only on that.
Got it. And I want to talk about this giving up thing. Like in the starting only, you were telling that if you decide to like separate your old personality, as in letting go of the old personality and becoming the version that you are becoming so that you can proceed in your life, I think it takes a lot of willpower. But I think a lot of people just take willpower as something that they want to hear in movies, in quotes, in songs, but they don't want to understand the science behind it. So if I ask you, like, what is the scientific reason behind keeping a strong willpower and not giving up? And then what can happen to a human? That's...
So willpower, every single one of us starts with our day with a finite amount of willpower, And how does willpower get depleted? Willpower gets depleted with every decision you have to make. So if you start off in the morning and you don't know what clothes you're going to wear, you don't know what's your first appointment, you don't know what your normal breakfast is, you don't know what time you wake up. Before you've even done anything, your brain would have used a lot of energy to make so many decisions. Okay, now in the morning, because you're refreshed and you have a bank of willpower, you're able to make a few healthier choices, right? But you've depleted that willpower. Now, later on in the day, because you've depleted it, you will not be able to make such good decisions for yourself because you've depleted that. So, if you want to hold your willpower strong and you want to use it in the best way possible, the secret to it is to build routines and processes into your life. Routines and processes are things that don't require too much of decision making, right? You just operate on that. You wake up, I wake up at a certain time every day, done. This is the breakfast that I have, or this is what I do. This is how I start my day. This is the clothes that I wear. The more things that are automated, you can save that decision making for things that are critically important. But if you're wasting it on mundane things the whole day, then your willpower will get depleted. And the only way willpower gets replenished is with sleep. So this is why, it's very, very encouraged to actually take a nap between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock, because that's the time when our blood pressure drops, right? That's the time when your focal energy drops. We know that we have one peak focus time post 3 o'clock. But if you have a little nap at that time, you rebuild your bank of willpower. You'll be far more productive and make better decisions in the afternoon, right? So willpower is a finite amount of energy we all start the day with, right? And the more process you have in your life, the more routine you set, and the more you set order in from the previous day, then what will happen is you'll keep sacred that willpower for decisions that are really, really important.
Yeah, but this nap part that you're saying that you have to take in afternoon, how can someone take who is a complete professional, which majorly people are?
It's about rearranging your day, isn't it? Like, I am not saying that your blood pressure drops between 2 to 3, or you have a low focal energy because I feel like, or I'm not saying this because I know what you're eating. I'm saying it because this is what circadian rhythm and science has shown us, that your blood pressure starts to increase from 6 o'clock in the morning. Your best focal energy is between 6 a.m. and 12 p.m., right? And then after that you have a slight dip, you have a peak, then you have a slight dip before the energy and the focus picks up again. So I'm saying that science is telling us this, that during this time here, energy will drop. So if you can manage your day and arrange your day in such a way that you can carve out 30 minutes during that time, and you don't have to go home to sleep, even if you're just alone in your cubicle, or some of the corporates I'm working up are putting in sleep pods or nap pods for that time, or just in your office, just putting an eye mask in and just letting the stimulus drop, it'll refresh the brain. Science is telling us that that you do this. Now, how you engineer your day is that willpower that you have, is that free will that you have, you have to use that and you have to engineer it. It doesn't mean if you don't do it, you're going to be doubly productive in that time. See, most people make the mistake of thinking that I work the whole day, I'm going to be 10 times more productive than the person who takes the nap in the afternoon. This is the furthest thing from the truth, because your brain doesn't function at its best and at its peak during that time there. So the person who's actually taking time off to replenish his energy sources during that time is going to be better suited than you who forced yourself to do something at a time when your circadian rhythm is not supporting it.
Got it. So you're not a big fan of which many corporate people and especially the startup culture is promoting, like working crazy hours, leaving Saturday, Sundays off, and working at least 13, 14 hours a day. You're not a fan of that?
No, not a fan. Yeah. I am a fan of hard work. I do understand that hard work is critically important, but I'm a bigger fan of smart work, So understanding how to align your hours, how to be prepared, how to remove distractions. I, for one, when I work with people, nobody hires me for time. I don't sell time. I sell a solution. You understand? Wow. So if that solution takes me 5 minutes to do, you'll get the exact same invoice from me. And if it takes me 5 days to do, you'll get the exact same invoice, right? And at very, very straight up, I tell people clearly, this is my fee and this is the contract, and this fee is linked to the solution. It's not linked to me showing up and standing in front of you for so many hours or me giving you so much of days. Right? You have to start to value the solution more than the time.
Definitely. And to put an end to the conversation and summarize it, I have this one interesting question for you. You are someone who has worked with one of the most famous sports athletes and even some celebs from the film industry and other walks of life as well. What is the one thing that you have taken away from them that you would like to tell people to follow?
I think the most important thing is, like I told you, they have a lot of discipline with how they show up. They have absolute clarity with who are the most important people in their life. And I think one of the key things that you can learn from a celebrity is they hire professional people and they surrender to that professional person to guide them and help them. They don't hire a professional person and then tell them how to do their job, right? Anyone who's achieved anything in their life will get the best person in there and then they surrender to that person. So if you want to get help, find the best person you can afford, get him in, and then listen to that person. Because finding the best person is the hard part. Getting them in is also tough. But none of us will work if you don't let them do their job. So the one key lesson I've learned from celebrities is bring the best people in and then surrender to them.
That's an amazing piece of advice. I think many startup founders would love to hear that, especially because of the toxic work routine we were talking earlier. Because of that, a lot of, I would say, creative people are not given that space. They have been continuously grilled, and that at the end kills their creativity.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a byproduct of various cultures that exist. There's some cultures that are very beautiful that are coming out in India, and there's certain cultures that are still very, very toxic in how people are doing it. And we have case studies and examples every single day that are rising around us. But it all comes down to you understanding who you are and what type of an entity and what type of a business you want to build and what is the culture that you want in that organization. If you have clarity of thought with that, it will emerge. There's no two questions about it.
Definitely. Well, I guess that was all from my side. I hope, Shyam, you enjoyed this conversation. It was a very different experience for me to having you and listening to so many different perspectives. Let me tell you, not a single thing was something that I had heard of, and that is the best takeaway from me from a conversation actually. That you hear something that you have not read or heard. So thank you so much for being so insightful.
Thank you very, very much for inviting me, and I'm so excited that you like the conversation, like the podcast, and I think the secret that to the way I have these conversations is to keep an open mind and be absolutely curious. And my advice to everybody is curiosity will serve you better than anything else in the world. So if something is very, very curious and you're curious about it, let that lead you down a path, down a rabbit hole, and it'll always serve you well. Be open-minded, be curious, and you'll always find yourself in a much, much better place.
Yeah. I hope I was able to do justice to the conversation.
Oh, this was a beautiful conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shyam.
Thank you so much.